Hello and welcome back to the Appear on Epigenetic Performance series. This is along today. And if you've been watching, you'll see that Dr. Dan Stickler had an interview live with Dr. Dan Engle. And so I have the pleasure today of being once again with Dr. Dan Engle. He's one of our favorite friends. It's interesting because his background is so varied, and what's really, I think, most significant about Dr. Dan Engle is that he has worked the entire lifetime of training around creating transformation in the human system. And it is a complex systems approach, right? He is developing now, and I'm excited to share this, developing now a Center for Transformation, and it's called Kuya, and it's going to be opening in Austin, Texas. And so my head tingles as I even talk about this, because it is such an incredible center. When this opens, you're absolutely going to need to come, right, to experience it, because it's really a new paradigm. And I'm going to let you talk about it, but a new paradigm around what's possible for human thriving and flourishing. And of course, slanted along the lanes of all aspects of the system, but the mental and emotional, spiritual aspects of the system. And so, Dr. Dan Engle, welcome. I'm going to let you tell us more about Kuya. Our title today, just so that you guys can hear me out there, is Spirituality and Science, and it's a merger of one world. And so we're going to get into this one world that's always existed in separate kind of ends of the spectrum. So welcome, Dr. Dan Engle. No. Tell us about what's going on.
Yeah, good to be with you, Micra. Thanks for having me on. Always a privilege to support what you guys are up to and continue to weave our thought fields together. So much is happening right now in the grid, in the matrix. It's a powerful time. Particularly as this COVID thing happens and the world goes on pause, whereas we can have the time to slow down and reflect and see how we've been living our lives and really consciously choose how to live the next phase. And so in the midst of this pause, it's great to have this conversation with you, speak about transformation, give a little window and a shout out to the Transformational Center that we're going to be opening up soon. What I see is rising now in the field of medicine, as allopathic medicine has dominated the last 100 years, to the exclusion of the other systems and the other paradigms, making at times wrong chiropractic, naturopathic, Ayurvedic, Chinese, all the other systems, right? And now we're starting to appreciate that, no, actually, we're all starting to recognize that this one world includes many different aspects and lenses to see a person through, to work with the one individual that we're connecting with, because everybody's unique. Right? The complementary array of integrated services is only growing. So it's really up to us to alchemize this field of medicine into its next iteration. So allopathic medicine dominated the landscape. That turned into functional medicine, and now regenerative and performance medicine. And included in that is transformational medicine. So how do we create the centers where people can have transformational experiences, where we bring together what I call software technologies and hardware technologies? If we think about it in the zeitgeist of a computer, if we're up-leveling the performance and consciousness of the computer, we up-level the software, the operating system, and we up-level the hardware. So as it relates to the human experience, that means we up-level consciousness while accelerating the performance of the central nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, and it all comes online, and downstream physiology and all aspects of self, body, mind, heart, and soul. All of those get woven into the grid.
An integrated being. You're talking about aligning with human evolution in a new way that we haven't experienced.
Yeah, it's a powerful time to see the technologies that are available, and to weave those technologies into the aspect and the science of consciousness. Because it's not just about performing at our physical best. It's about performing at the level of the integrated whole, as you mentioned.
And so sometimes, when we talk about the word, we use the word consciousness. I also see that used interchangeably with spirituality. So spirituality and consciousness kind of being chatted about together. And, I love distinguishing between religion and the stovepipes of religion that we have created, where we seem to think that we have a different creator, a different God for each segment of the human species. And I think we're all one species. And so I'd love for you to talk about how the spirituality piece, right, of course merges with the science, because we are talking about transformational medicine, and how those two things connect, and maybe do a little deeper dive into spirituality in a way that people can really hear that it's potentially an underpinning of the human system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love the recognition of the interweaving aspects of spirituality and consciousness. And so if I was to think about how they're related, I would put those on a hierarchy. And hierarchy actually means sacred order. It doesn't necessarily mean better than. It just means, or we could say holarchy, right? So you have like a nested egg, like the Russian dolls, right? You have one egg inside another egg, inside another egg. So if we use a holarchical model, then religion is a fairly narrow view of what spirituality encompasses. It's one aspect of spirituality through a particular cultural lens, usually. So we have religion, and then outside of that, we have spirituality, and then outside of spirituality, we have consciousness. And everything's consciousness. Everything's vibration. And if we look at one of the Kybalion, or the philosophies from Hermes Trismegistus, where all science came from, the number one law of the universe is all is mind. And so in the title of the opportunity for our interview today, you said a one world system, or a one world experience. Well, we're also talking about a one mind experience. And this isn't just archaic science. This has also been proven in the deep annals and laboratories of current physics. It was Edward Schrodinger, who the famous kind of Schrodinger cat experiment that helped us appreciate that it's only when we focalize our attention that materiality is localized, right? When the observer comes online, spirit comes into matter. So Edward Schrodinger, he was fond of this quote that says, the sum of the conscious minds in the universe is one.
Yes.
Like, just wrap your head around that. I had to like really digest that for months. So how is that possible? The sum of the conscious minds in the universe is one. Well, it makes sense if we're all leaves dropped from the same tree. We're all sparks of the divine coming from the same creative source. And so when we can actually prove out these things in science, and we also recognize that science doesn't know most of what's happening in the known world. Right? 95% of what's out there is dark matter, which means we don't even know what the luminous darkness is. Oh, and that's also as above, so below, right? That level of correspondence, another law of the universe. Inside, we also don't know 95% of our genetic potential.
Yes.
And it's not just junk DNA.
Right.
Nothing evolves evolutionarily after billions of years and is junk. It just means we don't know what it is. And so when we just start to appreciate the fact that there's a lot happening that we haven't tuned into, and those are just a couple of data points, right? Then we can start to appreciate that everything is evolving. We're constantly growing. We're constantly learning new things. And oh, by the way, 2/3 of all the Nobel Prizes for science, the data is later found to be irrelevant or inconsistent or actually not accurate, right? So thankfully, we evolve. Our truth evolves, our science evolves, and our consciousness evolves.
And I love that we're such dynamic organisms, constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly taking in from the environment and from each other, and really moving in such a beautiful orchestrated dance of life. I mean, just the fact that we're here. Just the fact that we're here, one, is the biggest mystery ever, and that we're working through this technology. We're creating things for ourselves that are a heck of a lot of fun, right? And I think this is what's so exciting to me right now, is that as we move from the reductionistic science allopathic Western medicine that has done incredible things, right? We all acknowledge that. But as we move from that reductionistic lens where we look at the pill for an ill, right? And we have mostly a sick care system as opposed to a health and well-being system that supports the entire human. As we move from that to the complex systems, the paradigm that you are creating at Kuya, that we have it appear on, which are the same exact rate, we're creating all together this beautiful multidimensional lens through which we get to merge the crazy new advancements in technology, advanced biologics, the ability to not only enhance our minds, but to upgrade the physicality to hold more of the consciousness that we are capable of holding, right? So I love this time right now on this planet, even with the interesting challenges that we are experiencing with this COVID situation. And so, I wonder, as we talk about the human system and this transformation, this up-leveling or enhancement or aligning with the new aspects of how we're evolving, we certainly get to recognize that what's here today also has the possibility of coming again in a different way through a different type of input, right? Considering that it's all an input. And so if you would speak to that about, I think maybe if you would look a little bit at how our mindset right now is informing our decisions of how we're all addressing this as individuals, governments. Definitely don't want to dive into politics at all, I have to say. But how we can right now look at this through a really impactful, positive lens with action that will make a difference, and also recognize that we get to right now align ourselves with an opportunity to be better at what comes along the pipeline next, because this is not a one and done type thing, right? So please, if you could contribute to that, I would love it.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like we could talk for hours on what you just outlined. And if we were to make a brief entry into that, I think of the brain as the most advanced supercomputer that we know in the known universe. We don't actually really know it, but we experience it. We are getting to know and understand and appreciate more of its gifts. And the science about how to accelerate its performance consciously. And it's a bidirectional informational field, right? It's an antenna as well as a receiver. And there are a lot of, 99%, if we just start talking about data again, 99% of the frequencies that are all around us are unknown to us. They're non-sensory frequencies. If we just look at the light spectrum alone, we don't see into UV, we don't see into infrared, but other animals do. We don't perceive electromagnetics on a gross level. We know that they influence our physiology. We don't experience microwaves or radio waves, and yet we can tune our dials of these fancy machines into their frequencies. We can do the same thing with our thoughts. We can, because if we're a part of the global brain, Peter Russell was writing about the global brain 20 years ago, and this idea of what's called the noosphere, and the fact that we are collectively as a one world species, a family of humanity, connected in this global brain. Rupert Sheldrake speaks about it in the morphic field, and all species of a given species have a global mind or have a group mind. And so we are constantly in contact with that group mind. And that group mind doesn't allow us to only tune into love and happiness. If we're here to open up our heart, that means we're in touch with the entire feeling landscape. And that means we also know that there's suffering. We also know that there's work to do on the planet. And our happiness is not divorced from another's happiness. And all life is actually equal and important.
Thank God.
We do get to choose which frequency we listen to more actively, right? If we're looking at the radio station, we know there's a ton of other channels, a ton of other broadcasts, but we want to broadcast this one as the one that's playing in the background more effectively, as love, as gratitude, as the inspirational potential that it is to be a human, and the privilege that it is to be in a human body on the planet at this time. So we get to just focalize that input point, but it's with conscious intention. Mm-hmm. And if we think about these laws I think of the 3 laws of living. Number 1, happiness is our blueprint. Yeah. Number 2, choice is our power. And number 3, life is school. And if we just look at the second one of those, choice is power, which means we get to choose consciously how to engage what we focalize our attention on. And if we take Viktor Frankl at his word in Man's Search for Meaning, the last of the great human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. So that means and if you know his backstory, and it's deep, right? He came out of the concentration camp, wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days. And it's since been the top 100 books of all time, because the dude just brought through the truth, and he raised the bar of what we now knew was our potential. And it gave us less excuses for playing the victim, which means we have the ability to choose in any given circumstance. The last of our great human freedom is the opportunity to choose our attitude. And so how do we choose to elevate our attitude? Well, we know our identity, we're clear with our belief systems, we keep orienting towards things that are feeling more growthful and more empowering. We stay connected in a community of other like-minded, other like-spirited journeyers on this human path, right? Because we do it as a community. We're born to bond. So with all of this getting more and more clarified that, yes, this is talk of consciousness, but if we bring it down into neuropeptides and at the cellular performance level, then we also know from Candace Pert's molecules of emotion data at NIMH that our thoughts affect our physiology. Yep. And they do that because our thoughts are projected into our energy body, and our energy body projects into our physical reality. And what is energy? You know, if we were having a conversation about energy bodies 20 years ago, people would have thought we were all wackos. And many people in the current medical paradigm might still think that, but that's only because they haven't caught up.
Right.
The two longest standing medical traditions that have been here for 3,500 years around each, Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, are very much centralized around energy medicine. There's an appreciation of an energetic field, right? The wheels of life, or what chakras translate into, are these power centers. Maybe there are 7, maybe there are more. Different systems say different things. The meridian system in the Chinese medical system, they're very much energy based. And our thoughts program our energy body. And our thoughts also come from our perceptions. So if we look at it in the time course, it's perceptions go to thoughts, thoughts go to actions, actions became habits, and then habits gain character. And that's more in the consciousness arena. If we look at it from the physiologic arena, that our perceptions create our thoughts, and our thoughts project into our energy body, and our energy body becomes the physicality. So when we know this as an integrated whole, then we can know where more specifically to help people identify with them. It's not like we come in and we say, oh, here's your problem. Let's have a conversation and create the story with our client, so they're still behind the driver's seat of their own life. We don't just pop in and say, you're in the back seat, I'm driving now. It's like, no, I'm going to get in the passenger seat with you. You're still driving. And here's our map. Here's our map of a total human and an integrated system. Where do you think the primary issue is? And where do you think we should intervene? And how can I help you do that?
And this is where science and consciousness merge in a way that we can actually validate it. So when you talked about the thoughts, they are electromagnetic realities, right, that send the chemistry going and create all of the reactions in the heart and the breath and the brain waves. And we can actually document it. This is the power of technology and the power of precision. I can put you through a what we call a psychophysiologic performance profile. Some people call it a stress profile. And I can tell a lot of what your thoughts are informing in your body. For instance, if there's an inner critic on board and I give you a mental task and you feel like that task you didn't do well, I can see it in your autonomic nervous system signals that we pick up with biosensors. And so it's interesting to have a conversation around the precision nature of each individual and simply ask questions of, so how did you feel during this? And then their own awareness takes them to the fact that the inner critic is there. And when we get to our own stuff through our own awareness, the real work has begun because we've taken responsibility for it. You know, I do have a question to see what your thoughts are on. You mentioned victim, and you know, victim energy. I have heard someone say that victim energy is the most dangerous energy on the planet because not only do they feel that they've been violated, they know they're right in the violence back at it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, if we look at David Hawkins' work on his scale of consciousness and how everything vibrates at something, and recognizing that victim lens is very thick and very challenging to see through, and it really requires courage for you to take action differently. What would you say would be, like, if people right now are sitting out there in the COVID thing and they're feeling like they're victims of the government shutting down their jobs or closing down the cities to keep us safe, or whatever they might be experiencing through the lens of somebody doing something to them? What would be sort of, you know, a tips or some type of strategy that could be used to potentially look through a different lens about what's happening right now?
Yeah, it can be a tough time on the planet right now, especially if our survival needs are threatened and we're stuck in a brainstem hyper startle fight or flight sympathetic overdrive. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's really helpful to, number one, but I think if people are in crisis, I think it's good to use your brain. BRAIN. Start with the basics, breathe, right? Slow things down, slow your breathing down, get in your belly, hum, or what's called Brahmari meditation, starts to stimulate the vagal nerve, autonomic nervous system moves over to parasympathetic tone. When we're in a restful state, we can think more clearly, we can act more wisely, and we can filter information better. And so we might therefore be less inclined to be one of the lemmings running off the cliff, because that's what the group mind is doing out of fear. And it's understandable. Sure. It just takes an active process to not go with the group fear mind. Mm-hmm. Because if everybody's running in a particular direction and you stop, it's going to feel weird. Like, oh, am I missing something? And then people are going to judge you for it and be like, what's up? Why aren't you, doing the thing? It's like, well, maybe I'm just going to slow down and breathe first. I'm going to halt. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And if I am, I'm going to deal with that. Start with those basics. Mm. And then I'm going to check my resources and see if I have community resources. What are my competencies? How can I engage the situation? I'm going to start to look at things more objectively from an attitude of inspiration, because I can choose that. But that's where it comes into faith. So let me I'll finish that. So that's A, attitude, optimize your attitude. I is really investigate the source. Investigate the source of the trigger, the stress, the information. And then N is navigate effectively or accordingly. Mm. Around attitude, it really helps to have some kind of zeitgeist around faith. And I don't mean faith in the religious sense, and I don't even mean it so much in the spiritual sense. A faith about the order of reality, a faith about the nature of existence. And that's why the third law of living for me has always been the savior. And that's that life is school. I firmly believe that we're here in school. I think we choose to come in into a hairless monkey suit with a lot of creative
or a lot of hair.
Or a lot of hair. Yes, it's true. I do have hair envy. If I could grow it that long, I probably would. And so when we come in, if we can orient towards the fact that life is school, and that means that I have a faith that consciousness is somewhere prior to a body and it's somewhere after a body. And Gary Zukov dropped that into my lap close to 30 years ago when he wrote Seed of the Soul. Right. And it was just such the testament at the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't know he was on Oprah's show like 36 times, and that's why she did her show the way she did.
Oh, nice.
She credits him for 25 years in the #1 position.
Wow.
Because what she did is she was really tuning into the truth of that person's calling, the nature of that person's relationship with their soul. And so if we think about and I'm not here to say that my laws for living are the right ones, but I get really curious about helping people develop the ones that are true for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the experience of life being school works for me. That means that everything that happens, I may not like, because I have an ego still and I have my own preferences still. I'm still working around those. But if I can slow it down enough to breathe, get centered, and then see how I might participate in this situation. James Hillman describes that too. He was a Jungian analyst and was constantly talking about this aspect of the soul when we get to participate with the environment, whatever's happening. That means I'm now moving from victimization into empowered position of co-creation, or at least co-resonance. I might not necessarily like what's happening, but now at least I can start to problem solve it and kind of mental Aikido my way around the best case scenario. Mm-hmm. And I can start to engage it from a place of curiosity and a place of, maybe it doesn't mean that I like or I approve people doing mean and harmful things to other people.
Sure.
But if that happens to me, then I get curious. What is the learning opportunity here? Mm-hmm. What might this be coming into my field to help me learn and evolve? Because I do believe, it's been my experience, that our greatest teachers are our biggest challenges, right? So if this is a challenge right now in the global collective, right, with this whole COVID thing or anything that comes up as a crisis, if I can slow it down and I can ask that question, how can I participate? For me, the only way I can ask that question is if I firmly believe that life is school.
Right.
I have an opportunity to learn something here. So it really comes down to those kernels of faith. And mm-hmm. faith means the belief in something without evidence, like from our 5D sensory perception, right? It means that I get to believe something. If there was evidence and proof, then it would not test my faith. It would just be kind of like realized evidence. And I could write that down like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But faith means that I can choose something at the core of my being and that, like rule number 2, if choices are power, right, then I can choose my faith. And it might not make sense to anybody else, but if I believe it at the core of my being, then it will become reality.
And I think that also ties to a word that maybe as difficult as faith for people to really internalize is trust, right? The trust that it's, right, as I said earlier, it's a miracle that we're even here. We can't, and none of us can even figure it out, right? And yet we're here. The fact that we wake up and breathe every day and that the sun rises and sets, it's a miracle. We trust it. We have faith in it. It's a beautiful part of this human experience. And so what would you say about trust? Because it's so hard for people to trust oneself, to trust each other when they've been, living in an experience that has been less than kind. Yeah. So what about trust?
I think trust and faith are like peanut butter and jelly. They just go so well together. And trust is another good one. Faith, the relationship that I tend to have with those two is very bidirectional. Faith is internal, trust is external, which means I'm trusting in something, right? I can also trust in myself. Typically, when we think of trust, we're trusting in something. And if I'm thinking about it in the context of our conversation, I wouldn't necessarily even use the word God because that can throw some people off. Mm-hmm. But I tend to think of trusting in the intelligent design that is the universe. That when you really get down to granular science, any one of innumerable variables, microscopically this way or that way, would mean that life would not exist on the planet as we know it, and potentially in our entire known universe. And so how fast, okay, give an example. Like, is it just coincidence that the moon perfectly fits in with the sun during an eclipse? Is that just coincidence? I don't think so. Or that the sun and the moon and the earth have this inordinately beautiful dance, to use your word from before, this dance of electromagnetic energetic frequencies, and that the sun as the divine father principle impregnates the earth as the divine mother principle to create all life on the planet in this one place that we collectively call home. You know, these are things that we can trust in. We can trust in the goodness of humanity.
Yes.
And we can also trust that when we are divorced from fear, we're more inclined to be responding and responsive to fear. Yes. If we're disconnected from love, then we tend to migrate towards fear. They're kind of inversely proportional in that way. And so all of these things allow us, when we start to unpack our belief systems and even divorce our belief systems from what we were impregnated with early on, right? As like these really young little sponges absorbing the data field, the trauma, the belief systems, the learning from our ancestors, because all that gets impregnated into the consciousness construct and passed on, just like hair color and eye color, passed on genetically. So if we can just start to own our belief systems and actually really look at, is that how I choose to view the world? Yes. Maybe my ancestors did, maybe the collective is, but am I choosing that myself consciously? And to know that I can choose a different path if it's more resonant for me and with me than what is happening in the collective.
Yeah, you know what I love is, I love epigenetics and transgenerational epigenetics in particular, because we now have proven, right, that there is a passing effect of really everything, right? And so when we talk about past lives, there's no question that we have past lives sitting in our human system. Right, we are what our ancestors did, thought, ate, drank. You know, their traumas and their joys. We are a compilation of all of that. And so, as we recognize that, and we recognize that, then the cultural editors, as you referred to, have done their very best to program us as we've grown up, and you know, below 7, being in that highly programmable state of predominant theta alpha or theta brain waves, where every single thing that we put in, as you said, we were like little sponges. And of course we believed what we were told. Now, with this, what I call sovereign responsibility, and these choice points that you talk about, we have an opportunity to go, hey, I recognize I got some things that have come down the line. I recognize that my cultural editors did the best that they could, because we all do at the end of the day, right? And now I also recognize I have that sovereign responsibility to choose the way I believe, the way I think, the way I act, you know, and it requires a bit of contemplation. We're going to need to look at who gave me that belief system? Why do I think the way I think? And could it be different? And so I often recommend that people put a question mark in their field, just to go, you know, I don't really know the answer, but what if everything that I thought to be true in the way I know it to be true might not be, right? If I have a field, then there is the potential that I can see differently and I can be differently. And so it's always around, right? How well is this action, this thought, this belief, this perception serving me? Do I feel good with it? Or is it something that I just don't enjoy? And for me, if I don't enjoy it, I retrospect it. Because I have that power over my experience. And so I love that you've opened all of these windows. So if we go into now, if we dream into what can we create together? And we go, all right, what can humans look like 4 generations from now if we do very specific things? So if you dream into that, what would be kind of the top places that light up for you? And even if you have a specific sort of kind of dream timeline scenario, whatever, what do you see?
This is such a good question. If I drop into what's true for me while I'm fielding a lot of other paradigms, a lot of other schools of thought, I tend to read a lot, and I enjoy reading from the masters, so to speak. And even appreciating those and receiving those teachings and letting those fall aside. I had a dream one time that two of the teachers I was working with at the time, Yogananda and Krishnamurti, came to me in a dream, and they said, at one point we had to burn all of our books. We had to let go of all of our teachers. And if I let go of all my teachers and I envision what's possible, I'm not sure if it's going to happen in 40 years, even in our lifetime. I do think we're coming together to help steward this collective ship in a good direction. And what I see as our opportunity is to recreate an experience of harmony. Harmony with one another, harmony with all life, harmony with the planet, harmony in consideration of our actions, and thoughts to sustainability and the effect that we're going to have 7 generations down. Mm-hmm. And then we're not looking at it just from this myopic, egocentric, me, mine, and I attitude, but that we move from that, which is understandable. It's just at a more primitive level of thinking. Because all systems that are most sustainable are cooperative systems. They're not competitive systems. That's how nature herself has evolved. Mm-hmm. So if I think if we move from the me, mine, and I to the us, the we, and the all, and then we recognize that we can use our technology for connection, for beauty, for inspiration, as opposed to mindlessly continue to consume and to create, because we're really creative beings, especially in crisis. We get innovative. So it stimulates us into action. It kind of gets us off the sofa. But when we recognize and we take a little bit of a higher ordered thinking, then what does it look like when we use our technology for global benefit, for global education, for global outreach, for global resource development, including sustainability? And we just start to collectively operate at a more virtuous level and an intentional platform. I know that's possible. Mm-hmm. I expect that it's coming. And I'm not sure that we'll see it fully realized in our lifetime, but I'm really stoked to know that we are in the laboratory of helping to co-create that future reality right here and now. Yes. And in the big grand scheme of things, from that meta position, I think I'd rather be in the midst of co-creating the juicy parts of how we're going to get there versus just realizing it at the end of the finish line. Like we're in the midst of the race right now. I think I'd rather be there. Yes. We're exactly where we are.
Oh, I am so grateful that you did what you just did. And I think it's safe for me to say that you are not talking about creating utopia.
No.
And so, yeah.
Because I don't even know what that looks like.
I know.
I mean, in this human form. I know it on a particular level. Yeah. And what happens when we all dream into that?
Yes.
Put our teachers aside and do our best to get true for what's present for each of us. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, it's kind of like what we've been able to do now during this big pause. It's like Mother Earth sent us to our room and told us to think about what we've done. Now that we've done, now we're in our room and we can just kind of like drop in. What does the world that we all choose to live in look like? Mm-hmm. And then when this whole thing blows over and we're allowed to come out of our room, then let's bring all of our coloring books together and compare notes. Yeah. And say like, oh, what does the world that you want to live in look like? Oh, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even think about that. Here's what I thought. And then we're like, wow, I didn't think about that. And then we just get to pool our resources and our collective mind around optimal potential, what we actually desire, the core of our being to experience. Mm. It's only possible to do that when we get quiet and we go inside. This is essentially the definition of meditation. It's stillness and inner perspective, inner absorption. So we have this opportunity, like, let's get creative and see what we want to make.
And so I'm going to invite everyone to dream your dream, because it is important that you dream your dream, right? This is the time that we are going to be able to step together to create new systems from the systems that have served us as well as they could. And now the new ones will stand up, and we will find such an opportunity for thriving and flourishing together and on this planet, where, you know, I'm going to say that we have a responsibility to future generations, and we can all contemplate what might that look like, not just our children or our grandchildren or the great-grandchildren, all of the beings on the planet and their future. And can we leave it for them much, much better than we certainly arrived into it right at this state. And Dan, I'm going to tell you, so I plan on seeing that dream because, you know, Apiron really knows that with youthful longevity and age rejuvenation, we're going to at least live 150 years.
I think we're going to be here for a while. We may just see it happen.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I am so grateful for you. And I'm going to pop up. This is your website. It's drdanengel.com. It's really cool. He's got some great interviews on there. He also has this concussion repair manual that he wrote. It's a book, and it's amazing. Your work in restoring the human system to its highest state of performance is really stunning. And we're so grateful that you're coming to Austin and that you and your partners are choosing to create this transformational medicine. What I think will happen through your model, if I may be so bold, I think that your model is going to redefine what we call the lane of mental health. And it's so stunning what I see coming from that model of wholeness and transformation. And I would love if you would agree at some point to come back on and talk about really the hero's journey and the archetypal windows that you're looking through as you're bringing transformational medicine online. I know it's going to go to teaching in at least the field of psychiatry and psychology and all of the mental health lanes, but it certainly, I think, is going to go across the entire complex system of the new medical models that are standing up. Mm-hmm. And I look forward to seeing it as part of the U.S.'s healthcare system, and indeed the world's healthcare system, because wholeness is wholeness, right? And we all want it. So, Dan, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and see you again soon. And come to Austin really soon, right?
Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. I suggest everything. Thanks for having me on, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Always.
Yeah, you. Take care.
Okay.